Welcome back to Andersen Acres. We're in the kitchen again and we're going to make another batter bread. This one is a German rye bread. It's really, really easy. It's so simple, anyone can do it. It's really flavorful. It has things like caraway seed, celery seed, dried onion, and garlic in it, so it's really flavorful. It's just a fantastic bread to serve, and it's a batter bread, so it's easy to make. So you're going to get yourself a bowl, big bowl, and something to mix the dough with, doesn't matter. This is so simple, it doesn't even matter. You can use anything to mix it. Don't do it with your hands though, because this is very wet dough. It's a batter bread, very wet dough. We're going to start off with 1 to 2 tablespoons of dried onion flakes. Okay, 1 to 2 tablespoons. It really is how much do you like it. I have about 1.5 tablespoons, but anywhere from 1 to 2 tablespoons. Then you're going to add 1 teaspoon of salt. I'm using Himalayan. You don't have to. You can use any salt. You can use table salt, kosher salt, sea salt, doesn't matter. Then we're going to add 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. Okay, very easy to use, just garlic powder, not anything complicated about that. Then we're going to add 2 teaspoons of caraway seed. This really gives the bread a really rich flavor, so you want that caraway seed in there. And then we're going to add just half a teaspoon of celery seed. It just helps the flavor of the bread pop. Okay, it's a really good flavor, really fun thing to have in there. So those are your basic spices that we're using. We're also going to add 1 cup of bran flakes. Okay, so just the same bran that you would use to make bran muffins. It's the same thing. So you just mix that up a little bit so you get those seasonings mixed in with your bran flakes. This gives it a really nice flavor. Okay, now we're going to start adding some liquid to this. I know we haven't added any yeast. We're going to do that at the end just so the yeast doesn't come in contact with too much salt, because we don't want the salt to kill our yeast. So we're going to add 1 egg. Yes, I'm still using store-bought eggs because my chickens suck. 1 egg. There we go. We are going to add 1.5 cups of water. The water should be around room temperature. You don't want it warm, but you also don't want it cold. Remember, cold water will kill our yeast. So we're just going to break that egg up and give it just a little mix. We're adding a couple more ingredients. I just want that egg broken up first, because you don't want an egg yolk getting hidden in your massive dough here. There we go. Okay, mix that up a little bit. Now we're going to add a 1/4 cup of oil. I'm eyeballing it. If you're not good at eyeballing, do measure. That's about a 1/4 cup of oil. I poured that a little faster than I normally do. We're also going to add a 1/4 cup of dark corn syrup. Okay, any corn syrup will work, but the darker corn syrups give you a deeper color and it just looks nicer. So we are going to use about a 1/4 cup of corn syrup here. That's about a 1/4 cup. That's our sweetening. That's why there's no sugar in this dough. Give that a mix. Yeah, it's very wet. There's quite a lot of liquid in this dough. But that's okay, it's a batter bread. It's supposed to be that way. Okay, so once we have that mixed together, we're going to add 2 cups of just your regular all-purpose flour or your bread flour, whatever you're using. And then 1 cup of rye flour, because you want to remember rye flour is really dense. You tend to not want to do an entire loaf that is just rye flour. You want to break it up with the white flour. So we're doing that. And then we're going to add 1 heaping teaspoon of either bread machine. Actually, that's all that's left in that jar. So 1 heaping teaspoon of either bread machine or quick rise yeast. Not traditional yeast, it takes too long. So bread machine or quick rise, that's it. Now we're going to mix that together. The reason we add the yeast at the end is so that it has the flour to get mixed into, so it's not hitting too much salt. And we also want to make sure we add it after a corn syrup so that it has a chance to get into contact with something that'll help it jumpstart. You know, so this is actually a really wet dough. So this is not going to do a firm, kneadable dough because we're just mixing. So you just mix that up until everything's incorporated. Again, you're not kneading, right? So you just want to push your dough around till like that is not incorporated. So don't think you're done. You have to keep going. Okay, but it will be a looser dough, and it is okay to get your hands in there now. You just don't want to do it at the beginning, because if you do it at the beginning, you end up with just a mess. So now would be an okay time to use your hands if you want to. You certainly do not have to. You could just push your dough around till it's properly incorporated. But do get it up on the sides of your bowl just to scrape that flour off. So if you have a wetter part of your dough, just kind of rotate that on your bowl just to pick up some of that flour, because you want as much of your flours and stuff as you can. But see, it's a very wet dough. It's not kneadable. So even if you wanted to knead it, like if I reach my hands in there, I am going to just come out covered in dough, which is fine. But you're not going to be able to knead this. Remember, it's a batter bread. So a secret to a good batter bread is knowing that it's a batter bread in advance, so that you don't sitting there going, what am I supposed to do with that? That's batter bread. It's supposed to be that way. So it's not a super wet dough, but it is too wet to knead. So you just move it around. That's actually looking pretty good. Take your spoon if you have stuff on your spoon and just find the flour on the edges with it and stick it back in there. Remember to scrape off your spoon because you want every bit of that dough. Okay, so we're going to set this aside to rise for about an hour and a half, right? Not a big deal. We're going to stick it aside to rise hour and a half-ish, so 90 minutes or so. Doesn't have to be exactly 90 minutes, but you want it to be puffy, right? So you want it to kind of fill out the bowl and kind of raise up just a little bit. It's hard to see when it's doubled in size, simply because if it's spreading, it's hard to keep track because it won't just rise up in a ball. It's going to spread to the bottom of the bowl. But about 90 minutes, give your yeast a little bit of time. It should spread out and puff a little bit. Then you'll know it's done. So we'll come back 90 minutes or so. I'm going to put this in my microwave to rise. You can cover it with a damp tea towel. The effect is the same. So we'll come back and see how it's risen up. All right, so our German rye bread, can't talk this morning, but our German rye bread has risen up. You can see that it is spread and puffed, so that's good. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to take our wooden spoon and knock the air out. Sometimes rye breads retain air a little oddly, so you have to make sure you knock that air out. So just fold it over itself, just kind of smash that air out. They call it punching down, but we're not punching anything. We're just smushing. We're just smushing our dough. Not a big deal. Okay, air is out. You want to get your bread pan. I'm using my silicone bread pan, so I don't have to spray it quite as much. We're going to use just a regular cooking spray, and we're just going to give it a spritz. Oops, I missed a spot. It doesn't need too much because it is silicone. Silicone doesn't stick as much. If you're using glass or a metal pan, you're going to want to really grease it because you don't want this stuff sticking. Bread dough does tend to stick. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to shove this out of here. Just give it a push. Just dump it into there. Ta-da! Then we're just going to give that a push into place, where it is a batter bread. This actually turns out to be a really nice bread. I really enjoy this one because it's very rich. So you don't want to skip any of those ingredients. You could, if you wanted to, leave out the onion if you don't like onion in your bread, but it does give it a nice depth of flavor. That is the ingredient you could leave out though. You still want to make sure you put your caraway seeds, and you want to make sure you have your corn syrup and things like that, just because this dough is quite fantastic as is. But if you don't like onion, leave out those onion flakes. Not a big deal there. So here we go. So now we're just going to set this aside to rise again for another 90 minutes so it can fill out this pan and puff right up. All right, again, cover it with a damp tea towel or even a piece of plastic wrap, or I'm just going to stick it in the microwave for about 90 minutes. Again, rye bread does take a little bit longer to rise. Be patient with it. Let it have a chance to puff up on you. So we'll come back in about 90 minutes so that we can bake this thing. All right, so our German rye bread has risen up. It's actually quite nice and poofy right now. We are going to bake it at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 35 to 40 minutes. Err on the side of longer is better for this particular bread, so closer to 40 minutes than 35. But check at 35 because everyone's oven is a little bit different. So we're going to pop it in the oven, come back in about 40 minutes, and see how it looks. Our German rye bread came out of the oven about 20 minutes ago. Now for best results, you want to let the bread in the pan sit on a wire rack to cool a little bit for about 10 minutes. Then when you take it out of the pan, Let it cool in the wire rack for a further 10 minutes, so you've had a total of 20 minutes cooling time. That's just the general rule of thumb for a lot of breads. This one is especially important. So we're just going to give it a slice. Remember, let the knife do the work when you're cutting your yeast breads. And look at how nice that is. It's a beautiful loaf, and it's just so tasty. It has caraway, celery seed, and of course a little bit of onion in it. So it's just a delicious, fun bread to have. Thanks for joining us today here at Andersen Acres. We'll see you tomorrow.